I think the situation is tough for the world if we are talking of today's situation, and uh, significantly tougher for India with 1.3 billion population, which is 20% of the global population, and we faced with, given our population size of the country, we faced with a double challenge. One is, whether the virus is going to kill us or the hunger is going to kill us, because bottom of the pyramid is already impacted. They have lost their wages because they were very daily wages, and soon enough the contract workers could lose their jobs, and they have problems of then surviving in metropolitans like Delhi, Bombay. They have to migrate back to, or at least travel back, if not migrate back to their villages, and trains are not available. So this is tough time. And you allow trains, then the virus will also travel across the country. So these are real tough times, and the impact of these tough times is not going to be limited to the lockdown period. That's going to continue for maybe a year or maybe two, as per the economists from the Western world. Uh, Now, coming to your question on leadership in tough times. Leadership in tough times compared to normal times or ordinary times, and leveraging my learning from my Reliance ADA days, is a couple of things. One, taking charge and leading from the front,
Yes.
so that you take the calls and you're responsible for the calls. It's not a team decision. It's not that the team is responsible for the calls. You're responsible for the calls. So whether an organization or a family or a country, whoever is leading the family or the organization or the country has to take the calls and take the responsibility of those calls. That does not mean stop listening. Continue to listen, but take the calls,
Yes.
because nobody is omniscient. Nobody knows the challenges and repercussions of all the challenges and all the repercussions of any decision, and therefore listening is extremely important, but quickly deciding is even more important. The second thing is be compassionate. Whether again in an organization, think of the lowest level of people, and if one can address the anxieties, the fears, and the challenges that the lowest level of people are facing, the challenges and anxiety of people above them will be addressed. The third thing that is extremely important, which ideally is the first, but is communicate, and communicate extensively, and communicate every day, and if possible, even communicate every hour, and communicate transparently, because that creates authenticity. So going back to the Reliance example, since you asked for that, when we realized that our com is getting into trouble or could get into trouble, chairman decided to have a press conference. And what we did was, and press conference in the evening would mean that the news will be up next day or late in the night on TV, next day in the newspapers, etc., etc. What we did was that we telecasted him on Facebook Live, not Facebook Live, but the private version of Facebook Live, the Workplace Live, and we got the whole group, not just Alcom, to hear him and also ask questions as much as the reporters were asking the questions simultaneously, and get the news firsthand from him rather than reading the newspaper or listening to the TV. We made sure that as we settled the full and final, we went bottoms up. The lowest paid guy got paid the first. So that was the example of communicating and bottoms up decision making, and not just decision making but actions. Decision making from the top, but decision making in favor of people at the bottom. So that made huge amount of difference. That helped us kind of close down gradually and not create any suicides, not create any strikes, hangama, labor court, none of those. No, I mean, in such a large company, we just had 2 people going to the court out of 10,000. So no, it would be a little difficult to even calculate the percentage, 0.02%. And that too, we amicably help them to understand the situation and resolve it.
Yeah, there's a.
So that, yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
There's a lot of learning in that, like you touched a thing, which is in fact very important, which is the communication part. Communication is definitely a challenge, but then we have the technology to support us these days. I mean, the WhatsApp and everything, and right now also we are making use of the technology. So that is some great, I would say, thing which gives me a lot of hope that we'll be able to, manage this crisis definitely much better. Adversity right now in the kind of a situation that we are in, that although the financial adversity seems very little in comparison to what we have come to, this is a financial disaster basically, and the whole disaster of the way the work will be happening in times to come. So I'll just take a minute and get Mr. Niloy, because that is one question that I had been waiting for him to answer, that how from his experience he can tell that how the technology can be applied in connecting people and getting this message of leadership across the world. Mr. Niloy, would you like to come in now, or Mr.
Yeah, sure.
Prashant, as you say?
Am I audible? Can you guys
Yes,
hear
yes,
me?
yes, you're audible. Yes.
Very clear? Okay. Yeah, so I think that's a great question, right? I mean, one of the reasons this epidemic spread so quickly worldwide is that globalization has made the whole world one village, right? And globalization is partly enabled by technology. As you said, I mean, the reason we're having this call is because of technology. Right? Otherwise, we won't be on this meeting at all, since we can't travel to to a room and get into a room and have a conference. So we can think about the role of technology in 2 ways: during the crisis, then post the crisis. Right? So during the crisis, I think technology. Firstly, let's take the most basic thing. Technology has allowed at least some people to work from home. A lot of people can't do that, but some people are doing that. Absent the internet, absent modern telecommunications, the kind of lockdowns we are seeing, nobody would have been able to. Right? At a very fundamental level, technology is allowing some small candles to burn. Now, as you talk about leadership, right? Technology can also enable some amazing innovation. Question is, do you use it? So let me give you an example. In Singapore, we use the app called Trace Together. So this tracks other users you have been in, or if you are the user, then it tracks the other users you've been in close proximity to. You need to be in close proximity to them for a minimum period of time for it to track. But then Now, let's say you test positive for COVID-19. Anyone you have been in proximity to can be traced and then tested, right? Now, this allows technology to function much more normally than if you need to shut everything down. So technology is giving you a chance to lead with a simple instead of going in with a sledgehammer and just banging everything down. China, by the way, has a similar app, except the usage there is mandatory. There's no voluntary thing, and that shows if you need to be quarantined. So there's a green circle basically. If you don't have the green circle in China, you can't enter anywhere. Successful. If you see the number of deaths, they've been able to lead with controlling it. After initially, I think they had a very poor response. But after that, they really controlled it. So the US has more cases than China now. By tomorrow, Italy will have more cases than both of them, right? So, the technology can be used to lead in many ways. Now, I think also the crisis is highlighting, technologies which existed but people didn't use. Suddenly take Zoom, right? Zoom is an example, household name. And the number of people using Zoom has jumped manifold. This will have a huge impact after the crisis because as people, once you're used to using these tools, you're not going to go back to not using it, right? I mean, people knew Skype existed, but you try doing a Skype call with, numbers, not easy. It doesn't work. I mean, you can probably if you use the corporate version. But Zoom has now made this easy, right? I mean, are people every time now get people together going to say, no, we need to fly to some place, or they're going to just say, let's do Zoom, right? So it will have an impact even as you go beyond, the crisis and you get to the period after the crisis. People are going to use the same technology. Now, actually, the biggest change is going to be this. All the stuff people are being forced to use now, many of the things which they may not even like at first will become part of society's experience and it's likely to change the way people will work going forward. Take, for instance, the work from home example again, right? So work from home is very common in Singapore, but it's not so much in India, right? A company I work, associate with, had to send its 80-odd employees home. They all work in the Delhi metropolitan area. And the CEO tells me he can't now keep up with the amount of ideas flowing in from his employees, who all have 3 hours extra per day free, which is hugely energizing them. Not only do they have extra time, they don't have to go to a metro or or some other form of public transport to kind of and get tired, commuting. They are just free to do to use their time. And now, if I take this company, I can fully see that post-crisis, it may still go back to where people work 1 or 2 days from home, right? It will give them a lot of extra time, right? And if well managed, it can tremendously improve productivity, right? It can also reduce the traffic and pollution in our largest cities, which is hugely needed. Of course, there's a downside, right? You lose the camaraderie, the face time, the discussions which happen, informal things, the rapport you build. But the fact is that a hybrid model of this can work very well, right? Again, here, whether these will work or not work, I think depends on what kind of leadership you provide. Right? I mean, you can be in the very controlling mode, which is saying that if the employee is at home, I don't know what he's doing, or you can find a way by which you can make sure that the output is there, so you don't have to worry about what he's doing as long as the output. It's not easy, but it can be made to work. This post-crisis, I think the other thing to think about is, the new normal may include some dark sides. Okay? So right now, individuals all over the world in a time of crisis are signing away their privacy and allowing. I give you the example of Trace Together. Right? Trace Together is again, you are basically now telling the government where you are every minute of the day. Now, let's say, it was not acceptable earlier, but now it becomes okay. If we do this for 6 months, you'll kind of get used to it. What if the government starts telling you after this that, it's also taking your temperature and through this app? And that is helpful for you because, you can be proactively diagnosed if you're going to have an heartache. You'll probably keep it on. Now, is that necessarily bad or good? Why did I call it dark side? Is because that can lead to a lot of abuse. Not necessarily that some governments will do it and others may not, but it can lead to a lot of abuse, right? So there's a lot of concern, I think, among some thinkers that this whole thing of technology, this crisis is getting new technologies in front, Another example is using artificial intelligence to identify people, right? Uh, in the past, if you had even the great KGB, right, if they had to keep track of more than 100 million Russians, what they were doing 24/7, they couldn't do it because even if you were to surveillance, whatever feed comes in from that surveillance, someone had to look at. Today, someone does not need to look at it, right? You can have an AI which looks and tells you only when there's a problem. So technology has its dark sides also, and it's going to take a lot of leadership, in my opinion, to make sure that we use the good side and we limit the dark side and we legislate the dark side. I'm really waiting to see, what comes of it. So I'll sum up by saying one thing, right? Technology is changing our lives every week, right? Things change, and this pace of change only is getting faster every few days. So the way I think about it is, you can think about it this way: today is the slowest pace of change that you are going to see for the rest of your life. Okay?
Yes.
It's only going to get faster from here on. Right? And this is true whether it's COVID-19 or COVID-19. Right? So technology is there to stay. So we really need to look at how do we make sure that it is used for the good and how do we limit the bad.
Thanks, Niloy. We'll come back to you. I'll go back to Mr. Prashant. Leadership, definitely. There is one aspect which comes out, Mr. Prashant, is that there is an extensive possibility of changes happening. And in fact, it's not anymore a possibility. It is going to happen. It has already happened. And there will be changes in people, their psychologies, and also in the organizations that we design. The spaces, in fact, I was just thinking that maybe we'll have to even design our spaces, our offices in a very different manner. So there is a huge amount of change which will have to be brought in many ways than we can even imagine. So I'm just trying to think out aloud with you that what are the changes that do you see that organizations will have to be making when as we go further with these kind of issues. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anuj. I think, as Nilay said, that once people and organizations have experienced work from home and the advantages and the disadvantages of it, there will be perhaps more and more work from home. And that's where the organizations will have to invest more and more in technology. We're doing a public survey on work from home motivations and challenges. The responses that have come in, the two biggest issues that are cropping up is one, teamwork, and the second is the workspace inside the home. So people are kind of caught unaware, and a lot of people, especially in Bombay, the challenge appears to be more, if we do the analysis by city, that people do not have space, desk, private space to work from home. They're working out of dining table, out of the drawing room, or even working sitting on the bed. But these are some of the comments that have come up on the workspace. So I think there's a whole, not just organizational change, but a social change that will have to be impacted, where these workspaces essentially will have to be built in the house, in every house where people want to work from home, because that's becoming a significant distraction. The satisfaction from work from home is lower in females than in males. And if you look at those comments, that's because they have to attend to the kitchen and the servants not coming in times like this, and they have to attend to the children, so on and so forth. Also, perhaps sociologically, male get an advantage of getting whatever workspace they have in their flats than women. And I can see Sangeeta smiling. So she can perhaps empathize with her colleagues who might be communicating similar challenges to her. So I think Sangeeta wants to say something. Anuj, do you want to unmute her? Yes, Sangeeta, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree what you said, sir, because the same problem my colleagues are facing, they do not have the infrastructure to work with. You know, there some people are not having the laptop because it was all of a sudden, and we were supposed to work at least 1 or 2 person per department in the college, and they could not take the things along. And I was so this is a real problem because their husband's work is considered to be more important. They are getting the place, but the ladies are taking a back seat in that particular thing. Also, I would like to share the Apple has been very good. My children are working with the Apple in the US. So US has given them complete infrastructure. They have told them till 25th of this month they can pick up anything what they require to set up an office in their house, and they can even take table, chair, whatever is required, and even electronics, and they can take it, set up office and work from there. So then those conditions are little good. When the people can work in India, it is little difficult. Unless and until Thank you.
Thank you, Sangeeta, for your inputs. Those are real great insights which tie in with what the responses to our survey are saying. So coming back to, therefore, Anuj, your question, I think the changes certainly are at an organization level, but there are societal changes that are required. There are changes at a structural level in every house or flat that are required. And now coming back to the organization, as Sangeeta pointed out, there are companies like Apple who have asked people to buy whatever they want to. Now, we've done an analysis of companies some time back, and what we realized that broadly there are two kinds of companies. One, which are in high margin business, and none of the businesses continue to be high margin forever. So if you look back 20 years, maybe Infosys was a very high margin business, right? And therefore they could extend all kinds of facilities, services to people because the margins were high, it didn't matter. Over time, what has happened is that software service is no longer the high margin business, which is evident from the fact that in 2005, the fresh engineer salary used to be 2.5 lakhs. And in 2019, the fresh engineer salary is 3.2 lakhs. So that's just an increase of 70,000 rupees on a base of 2.5 lakhs over 14 years. If you take a CAGR, that would be less than 1%, right? And this is in nominal terms. If you take the whole thing in real terms, it's hugely negative. So software jobs are no longer, software service jobs are no longer attractive. The best talent no longer goes there, and all of that. And they can't extend the same facilities. I mean, if they can't pay the same level of salaries in real terms, they can't extend the same level of facilities. So what, I know, and the very few businesses in the world which are high margin. Most businesses, service businesses operate at a margin of 20%, and most, the 7.5%. Now, given the margins what they are, how do you, and the advantage of manufacturing is that margin per person is quite a less. Disadvantage of services like software services is that the revenue is a multiplier of number of people, and if the revenue is not going up the per person, then and margins are not going up by per person, extending some of these things will be difficult. And therefore, what will happen and what should happen is, but these have to be extended, right? So what should happen is that these companies will have to reduce the investment in real estate and increase the investment in technology and give some allowances to people to set up the basic infrastructure like broadband, like a working desk, like some partitions around the working desk to separate it out from the rest of the bedroom, etc. Uh, and compensate that by a lower investment in office space, which is the which is the uh, real estate cost, which is one of the very high costs that hits a business. And to do that, we will, a lot of companies have already done that, but we will have to majorly move to a paperless office. Once it is paperless, it doesn't matter whether I'm sitting in office or sitting at home, sitting on X desk or Y desk, which means we will have to have flexible seating system in the office so that you provide 70 desks for 100 people or some such number depending on each business. And the money that you save on 30 desks goes into investment in technology, because technology is not cheap. If you ask any startup, how do their costs stack up? Number one cost is wage cost. Number two cost is the server cost. And number three cost is the real estate cost. So those of us who believe the media that the servers are cheap and all that, take it with a pinch of salt. It's not cheap. What they're saying is that it was very, very expensive. And if you take the longitudinal time, the costs have come down. But in absolute terms, it is still not cheap. So, businesses will have to be viable. Anything that is not viable and that is not creating a positive impact on business will not be implemented by business leaders, is not sustainable. That will become an HR initiative. And I believe there should be no HR initiative. Every initiative should be a business initiative, right? I was going through the research of Professor Nick Bloom of Stanford, who's been a vociferous advocate of work from home. And he's done multiple experiments to demonstrate that on an average, there's a 13% improvement in productivity when you work from home. He's gone on to clarify his findings and said that work from home works if it is voluntary and not forced upon. If people come back to office at least once or twice a week, and for jobs which are more of individual contribution nature than of teamwork, he strongly believes, and his research and experiments strongly show, that working from home has a negative impact on innovation and invention. He's also predicted, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in the next 1 or 2 years, that this will demonstrate itself with much lower patent applications in 2020 and 2021, because he believes the impact of this is going to have a huge spillover, not only through this year, but maybe through the next year as well. Some of the caveats to work from home. This COVID is, as far as leadership is concerned, it's not just about work from home. It is setting up a whole new norm, a new normal. Now, if I can produce power or steel with 30% of the people working in office and 70% staying at home, the next question, and there's an HBR article on this, much before the crisis started. They said, just in case the crisis starts, are we prepared? And these are the 5 things that we need to prepare ourselves. But the question that is going to be raised, and I can pull a leaf out of my past experience, is that how much are these 70% of the people contributing? Do they need to exist? How many of them actually need to exist? So all the HR heads and CHROs on this call should be prepared for answering this question when the situation goes back to normal. I'm out of that role, so I don't have to answer that question. But yeah, that is the reality. And if people are not working from home actively, and if some people are treating this as take it easy time, be prepared. You might have to take it easy for a long time then.
Yeah.
So then there are challenges of, I mean, Economic Times is already predicting a job loss of 2 crores across sectors, which is 20 million. United Nations is predicting 25 million. I don't know how. Does that mean rest of the world is only going to lose 5 million jobs? Or is it 25 million outside of India and China? I'm not aware. I haven't gone through the details. But all in all, there are huge job losses that are evident. Now, from a country leadership perspective and from an organization leadership perspective, the question is, how do you manage the social impact, the economic impact, because the consumption will go down. If so many people lose their jobs, they're not going to spend. If the consumption goes down, that will have an economic impact in terms of GDP. And as organizations, if there are by chance any CEOs, you don't have an option, because if your competition is going to reduce the cost of manpower and you don't, you're not going to be competitive. So those are serious questions and serious challenges way beyond work from home that are likely to crop up, and that are far more serious and need far more transparent debate and discussion, and proactively the organization, the individuals, and the country will have to address these questions.
Yeah, you touched a very important point, sir. One is which you are saying is, can you hear me? Yeah, one is that if the things get back to normal, from what I have been reading, and I'm sorry to say that we'll have to get used to a very new kind of a world. It's not looking that things will be getting back to where we started from. So, which means the best way to do and to reduce the pain is to adjust to the new normal, to understand and analyze each and every aspect of this new normal. And that's why leaders like you, leaders like so many people who are there, will have to play a very important part in designing things to get across this problem. And this is not an easy one, especially in a country where dissemination of an idea takes time. And more than the communication does reach people. The behavioral change is something that I think will be getting a lot of focus, and that's where leaders come in. That is my view.